Hi, everyone, and welcome back to No Borders English Studio. I'm Tara, and today we're going somewhere really useful: the sound of your own voice. Have you ever noticed that some people can say almost nothing and everyone leans in to listen? And there are other people who can talk for 10 minutes and no one even remembers a word. Today, we're listening to ideas from a talk by Julian, a sound expert whose TED Talk on this exact topic became one of the most watched TED Talks ever. This isn't a talk about learning English, it's a talk about communication in general. But that makes it perfect for us because the vocabulary he uses to describe how we speak is vocabulary you can use in English no matter what you're talking about. So listen for the ideas, listen for the new words, and don't worry about catching every single detail. That's not the goal. The goal is training your ear. Let's get into it. Treasure starts with a warning. He says there are habits. He calls them dramatically the seven deadly sins of speaking that make people stop listening to us almost immediately. So, a deadly sin is a religious term for a very serious wrongdoing. Treasure is actually being playful here. He's saying these habits are communication crimes, not real sins. Here's a paraphrase of his list, one by one. Gossip. Gossip is speaking negatively about somebody who isn't there to defend themselves. Treasure points out the irony. The person gossiping now will probably be gossiped about later on. Judging. Judging is constantly evaluating people while they talk to you. It's hard to open up to someone who you feel is silently scoring you. Negativity. A generally pessimistic, gloomy way of talking that drains the energy out of the conversation. Complaining. This one, Treasure says, spreads like a virus. One complaint invites another. Excuses. Excuses are blaming circumstances instead of taking responsibility. Lying and exaggeration. Stretching the truth or completely inventing it. And dogmatism. Presenting your opinions as if they were undeniable facts. So, dogmatic is a great word. It means being completely certain your opinion is correct and refusing to consider you might be wrong. Which one of these seven do you think is the most common in your own culture or maybe in your workplace? We'll come back to this idea at the end. So, those are the habits to avoid, but Treasure also gives us something positive to build on. Four principles that spell the word hail. H for honesty, being truthful and clear, not hiding things or twisting them. A for authenticity, simply being yourself rather than performing a version of yourself you think people want. I for integrity, doing what you say you'll do, being someone people can actually rely on. And L for love, but not romantic love, genuinely wishing that the other person is well. Let's look at the word authenticity. Authenticity is a noun. You may also hear the word authentic, which is an adjective. So to be real, to be genuine, and not fake. You'll hear this word constantly in modern English, whether people are talking about food or art or personalities. Treasure's argument is simple. If your speech stands on these four things, people will want to listen, not because you tricked them, but because they trust you. Here's where the talk gets really practical and where we get some fantastic vocabulary for describing voice and delivery. So Treasure says the human voice, it's like an instrument, and most of us have never learned to play it properly. A few of the tools he mentions are register. Register is how high or how low you pitch your voice. He points out that in elections, we tend to prefer politicians with deeper voices because we associate a lower register with authority. Timbre. Timbre is the texture or quality of a voice. Research, he says, shows people prefer voices that sound rich and warm. There's prosody. Prosody is the musical rise and fall of speech that carries meaning. Speaking in a flat, single note, it's called being monotone, and it's exhausting to listen to. It's very robotic. Pace. Pace is speeding up for excitement and slowing down for emphasis. There's also silence. Treasure defends the pause. A well placed pause, he argues, can be more powerful than words. So I mentioned a word, monotone. Monotone, a flat, unchanging tone of voice with no energy or no variation. This is a really great word for describing a boring lecture or speaker. It sounds a little like this. Welcome to my class. Let's start now. Open your books to page 15. Someone read the first paragraph. It's so monotonous. It's very boring. So we don't want to do that. We want to add some different tones and pace, timbre, register, prosody, all these things that we just mentioned. So why does any of this matter for you as an English learner? Because these aren't just ideas to understand passively. They're tools you can start using in your very next conversation in English. Think about it this way. A lot of learners focused almost all their energy on grammar and vocabulary, which it's important, of course, but Treasure's talk reminds us that how you say something carries almost as much weight as what you say. And the good news is these tools don't require a bigger vocabulary or perfect grammar. They require awareness. Here's what that could look like in practice. Next time you're speaking English and you notice yourself rushing through a sentence, try slowing your pace deliberately, the way Treasure describes. It instantly makes you sound more confident and more in control of the language, even if you're still building your vocabulary. If you tend to speak in a flat, even rhythm, try adding a little more prosody, a little more rise and fall. It doesn't just make you sound more natural, it also helps your listener actually follow your meaning. And don't be afraid of silence. A lot of learners rush to fill every gap with or like, worried that a pause makes them sound less fluent. Treasure would say the opposite. A confident pause often makes you sound more fluent, not less. Finally, remember H.A.I.L, when you speak English with native speakers. You don't need perfect grammar to be authentic, honest, and warm. And those four qualities often matter more to your listener than a flawless sentence. In other words, fluency isn't only about knowing more words, it's also about how you deliver the words you already have. And that's genuinely encouraging news because it means you can sound more confident in English starting today with the English you already know. Treasure ends by imagining what the world could look like if people spoke consciously and listened consciously. A world that sounds beautiful, where understanding is the norm rather than the exception. It's a nice idealistic note to end on. And honestly, it's a nice note for us to end on too. So, which of the seven deadly sins of speaking do you notice most in your own daily conversations? And can you think of someone whose voice you find easy or hard to listen to? What is it about their register, their pace, or their tone that you like? Maybe try saying one sentence three different ways: monotone, and then with lots of prosody, and then very slowly for emphasis. Try to notice the difference. And which one of Treasure's tricks, pace, prosody, silence, or H.A.I.L, do you think would help your English the most? Try it in your next conversation. And also, drop it in the comments, an answer to one of these questions. I always check the comments, and I am so happy to hear from anyone who wants to interact on our page. So let's take a look at the vocabulary that we discussed today. Deadly sin, dogmatic or dogmatism, authenticity or authentic, integrity, register, timbre, prosody, monotone. There was also a phrase to spread like a virus for complaining. That's it for today's listening and vocabulary practice. If today's episode helped you hear some new words and ideas, give it a like and check the link in the pinned comment to watch Julian Treasure's full original talk. It's well worth the 10 minutes of your time. If you'd like the transcript from today's podcast, I'm going to also leave a link in the description to my Substack page where you can find everything that we talked about today. There's also a link in there so you could print out the transcript to even study from later on. Remember, English has no borders. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter how old you are, and it doesn't matter how long you've studied. This language belongs to you too. So keep going, keep learning, and I will see you in the next lesson.